Welcome back. I'm Tim. This is Troy, and we are sitting down every single week to just talk through what we've been talking about on Sunday mornings. Yep. We're in a series called You Are Not Alone, and it's really been a lot of fun. Well, I don't know if fun's the right word. It's been really good, though, to sit down and have conversations about how to follow Jesus in hard moments. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about grief and loss and fear and insecurity. And then this is our third week. We're looking at questions and doubt. I forgot what we were talking about today. Questions and doubt. And I guess before we get too far into it, could you just talk through how you got here in the text for this week and what, I don't know, kind of how you approached this week's sermon?
Yes. We'll continue on in the text in the Gospel of John. We get to Thomas, who is known for his doubt, his skepticism, and makes the comment, unless I see the nails, I won't believe, even though all of his friends said, we've seen him, and he didn't believe his friends. And I think that idea of doubt is something that I think it's good to talk about, because I think oftentimes in churches we want to say, well, just have faith, just believe, and we don't encourage people to doubt and question and wrestle with things that they are doubting about. And so oftentimes people will push that down. And so basically, as we looked at the text, give people permission to doubt and let that doubt, as they ask the questions and walk through that season, understand that their faith can actually come out stronger on the other side.
We've talked, I feel like it was a couple weeks ago, I think it was Easter week actually, we talked about the idea that we associate doubt with rejection of faith. And if I doubt it, then therefore I must not believe. And that's a slippery slope on one side, but it's also probably, I think, a poor definition and poor job on the church's side of, we haven't taught people how to wrestle with their faith well. And so, and part of that comes from, I would say, a long-held assumption that we have to have everything put together, and we have, our faith needs to be clean and crisp and no issues at all. And that's not how people work. That's not how faith works. And I think that changing that paradigm is kind of an important thing for how we learn to approach doubt.
Yes. Yeah. Doubt is not the same as unbelief. No. That you can believe, but still doubt and have questions and have wonder and not have all the answers, and that can be an actually good thing. We talked about a couple examples, biblical examples of that, of John the Baptist, who had been hyping Jesus up, and then was like, wait a minute, are you who we expected to be? Or I love the line of the man who came to Jesus where he said, I believe, help me overcome my unbelief. Because I think that's where a lot of us are. Yeah. We have faith, but then there's things that we wrestle with and go, that's okay.
Yeah. I love that. Or even I think you mentioned the story where a guy asked Jesus to heal his son. It's like, if you can. Yes. Yes. Man, I brought him here. I'm asking you to do it. And it's like, everything about that is like, I think you can, but if you can, and that's that there's just this underlying element of doubt. And I think that's going to have to be, it's going to have to be something that we will constantly deal with all the way through our faith, because the reality is we're tangible people. I want to see what it is in front of me, and faith means that we're not going to be able to always see. That's what faith is. It's learning how to believe without seeing. And if I remember right, I think in that same passage with Thomas, Jesus talks about blessed are those who believe. And I can't remember the exact line, but that same idea of who believe in me without seeing me.
Yes. Yeah. That's definitely it. Yeah. Thomas had said, unless I see you, and then he sees Jesus and says, my Lord and my God. And Jesus is like, well, that's great, Thomas, but blessed are those who believe in me who haven't seen me, which is great because that's us. Yeah. Right. We haven't seen him.
Nope. Cool. So I just figured we'd walk through kind of some of your points of the sermon, but also just use it as a structure for us to discuss doubt, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. So the first thing you talked about was causes of doubt, and so you threw out a couple. And the first one, you had trying circumstances, which would be similar to the story that we saw Matt and Megan tell on Sunday of, man, they were sitting in a season of it was a trying circumstance. They were in the hospital, but they could only be alone, like one at a time with their daughter, and they always had to be there, which means for a long time they saw each other in the hallway, gave each other a quick hug, and that's all that they could do. And their daughter was struggling with health issues. Their kids are at home also needing parenting and attention and love. And it was a trying circumstance. And that's a season when doubt can kind of creep in.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved Matt's honesty in that video. So if you haven't checked it out, you need to check out that video. But Matt
on Facebook and YouTube.
Yes, where Matt talked about how God has proven himself good over and over to him, yet he's going through this and not sure how to reconcile that, going, I can't be disappointed in God because he's good, but at the same time I'm hurting and I don't know how to process that. And that's where, trying circumstances come in, and it makes us wrestle. Okay, I believe God is good. I've experienced God's goodness, but now life isn't good, and I don't know how to process that.
It's so good. You quoted Lisa Turkhurst, which was a fun quote that someone had emailed both you and I, and it said, "It's difficult not to doubt the light of his truth when everything around us looks dark." And that's a fantastic, honestly similar to the grief and pain conversation we had a few weeks ago of it's in like the darkest moments we know God is there, but you can't see him, you can't feel him often. It is kind of this pit of despair that you're in, and it's okay in that moment to doubt. And I want people to feel permission to have doubts in that moment. Not doubts as in clearly, well, no, I think it's totally fair to question man, does God really love me? That's a hard, honest question that people are having. And it's okay to ask that question because God is both big enough to for you to ask that question of him, and also faithful enough to be there with you even though you're doubting him.
Yeah. Well, my mind wandered for a second when you said pit of despair, went to Princess Bride and the pits of despair. But that idea of, that it's okay. I mean, again, the Psalms are just full of times where David and the other people who wrote the Psalms are experiencing difficult circumstances and they're questioning God. Why? I don't understand. And so understanding that in those seasons where life is hard, you start to have questions. That's natural. That shouldn't be something that you feel ashamed of having questions and having doubt during those times.
Not at all. I mean, we all do it. And to pretend that we don't do it would be hypocritical and not healthy. So we all have those seasons. The next cause of doubt that you used was unmet expectations. And I feel like something that my wife and I have realized even in our marriage is that most of our issues come from uncommunicated expectations, which are the same basically as unmet expectations. I expect something, it doesn't come through, and now there's tension. And we do the same thing with God. We absolutely do the same thing with God. We expect him to solve a problem, or we expect him to take care of something for us, or help us not have pain, or whatever it is, and he doesn't. And now we're stuck in our question of going, now what? And that's a hard place to be if you don't, if in that moment you kind of disengage and you're just out there. That's why in that moment community is really important, because doubting in community, you're able to lean on other people's faith, even though your faith is still there, but is very wounded. And you feel like God has hurt you. And it comes back to that same thing that Matt said, I know you're good. I know that you are completely good, but I'm still mad. And I don't know what to do with that.
I love that idea of leaning on the faith of your community when your faith is not strong. And that is that importance of having community, having a group of people that you're doing life with so that you can be there for each other. Because we will go through highs and lows. And if you have somebody that you can lean on saying, I'm just really struggling now, and going, hey, I'll be here for you. I'm just going to walk with you through this. The
other piece I also think is sometimes we'll be doing whatever our rhythm of faith is, and Jesus can step in and kind of call us into a new season of, he might be redefining what we understand as church, or redefining what we understand as community, or even just following him, kind of saying, hey, like, we're going to address this issue, whatever this issue might be. And it forces you to look behind you at like where you've been. And there can be moments of doubt in that as well. Of, have I been, like, you're doubting yourself, even your own faith. Is my faith actually real? Because what I've been doing, it now feels like it was dead and worthless. And was there something of substance there even? And was that time wasted? And that can cause kind of a crisis of faith a little bit as well. And that's a hard season. You can feel like you can disappoint family members, and it just becomes this weird, like, I'm still following God, but now like everything's murky.
I think that's a good point of sometimes we're not necessarily doubting God, but we're doubting our own faith and ourselves. I think there are a couple of obvious seasons that a lot of people go through. One that's been in the last few years that researchers have talked about, that 5th, 6th grade years for young people, that they are starting at that age of 5th and 6th grade wrestling with what they believe. We usually think of teenagers or once they leave the house and they wrestle, but it's actually earlier than that. 5th and 6th graders are starting to wrestle with, do I believe what mom and dad say and what the church says, and as their minds are starting to develop. And then there is that natural graduate, move on, and mom and dad aren't waking you up to take you to church, and so you're wrestling and trying to figure out what your faith looks like. But then there are times where all of a sudden you have an encounter with God that moves your faith forward, and are called to something that maybe your family doesn't understand, and so then you start doubting, well, is God calling me here? Is God calling me to do this when my family or other people are starting to question me, and you start wrestling with those doubts?
That's good. That's really good. And it kind of is the same, it's in the same vein, at least, of the third cause, which would be limited knowledge. Like, we only know so much.
Yep.
And for a young person, that's a hard place. Like, it's easy for me to look back and go, well, yeah, but I also have the years of experience after that, which probably even is a conviction and a point for me to look at young people, well, for all of us who are older in a faith, to look at young people and go, hey, it's worth it for me to be there alongside those people in that time, which is why our student ministry and kids ministry are so vital to our faith, our kids' faith, because they need people who they can trust, who are not their parents, who can step in and go, hey, like, Jesus matters, and what you're going through is okay, and I'm here to walk through it with you. And those roles, even in my life, looking back, those were crucial to my faith development.
Yeah, and being willing to have those conversations and saying those 3 words, I don't know. I don't know. And it's a really hard sentence to say. We might talk about this later, but of wanting to have answers. But this limited knowledge, there's so much that we don't know. And when we encounter something and there's not knowledge, or it doesn't fit into our view of thinking, we all have our own preconceived ideas, our own worldview, and then when we encounter something that doesn't match up with our worldview, we're not sure what to do with it. And our first reaction oftentimes is to doubt. Well, it can't be true because it doesn't meet up with what I already believe. Yes. And so we can wrestle with doubt during those times.
That's really good. Which even is a great segue into the second part, which is dealing with our doubt. So this is which we've kind of been discussing a little bit, but this is what's caused our doubt, whether it be our circumstances or expectations or our lack of knowledge, and also other things as well that either fall into those categories or are outside of those categories. But what's a good process and a good stepping stone pathway for us to deal with the doubt that we have? So you said your first one is discern the cause of your doubt.
Yeah, that's like when you go to the doctor and you have something wrong, the doctor goes through all of these different tests to figure out what's wrong.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, why is he asking those questions? It doesn't necessarily even deal with the symptoms, but he's got his things he goes through to make sure that he treats the actual cause.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we are great at treating symptoms rather than the cause. And so really being reflective, being honest with yourself of why am I doubting?
Mm-hmm.
Is it because I don't want to believe?
Yeah.
Is it because God isn't behaving the way I thought he should? Is it because life just is really hard right now and I'm hurting, and so understanding the cause of the doubt is a great first step.
And I think that point about treating the symptoms, it is so easy. Well, the symptom of doubt is discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all of a sudden there starts to be this kind of tension that has been introduced into your faith, and it's uncomfortable because you're not sure about something. And treating discomfort is the exact opposite of how to treat doubt. Mm-hmm. And so what can happen is if you just do what you need to do to make the discomfort go away, what you're actually doing is robbing yourself of the foundation of the faith and turning it into an inauthentic. You're just going through the motions, and that's probably the most dangerous thing you could do to your faith, is just perform and not actually have the relationship, even even a conflicted, tension-filled relationship with God. That's still in process. That's better than just performing and going through the actions, because that's you're not actually in relationship. You're not actually following a God. You're just being religious.
Yes. I have a good friend who describes his relationship with God as a wrestling match, that he's constantly wrestling with God. And I just love that honesty. I also love that word picture, because it really goes to the next point of dealing with doubt. Because if you're not honest and willing to wrestle, then your faith's not going to grow. If you're not willing to ask the questions and struggle, your faith is going to stay where it is. And none of us have perfect faith. I talked about viewing doubt as the gap between where your faith is and perfect faith. And none of us have perfect faith. And so allow those seasons of doubt to help your faith grow. Use it as opportunity to research, to struggle, to ask questions, to wrestle with God, because then your faith will come out stronger at the end.
And I mean, those growth seasons are often, we were sharing a little bit yesterday, our growth seasons are often the same seasons as deep pain and deep struggle, and sometimes even our darkest moments. Often our growth comes in really beautiful and joy-filled moments too. So it's not like it has to be miserable for you to grow. But those seasons of heavy doubt are actually some of my... I'm so grateful that those seasons happened. I don't want to say those are cherished moments, but I'm so grateful those seasons happened, because they've driven me closer to Jesus in really cool ways. And that season of doubt is this next one. It's be ready to live with mystery. And I was just sharing before we even turned the camera on, this one might be my favorite, not because I really have a lot to say on it, but learning to sit in mystery is something that the American church isn't good at. We have always had to be very structured with our faith. We, Sunday school starts at this time, the bell rings, we're done. We go, we'd go have our donut and our cup of coffee, and then we go and we sing the 3 songs. We're so structured, and then we do this Bible study on this day, and we pray before meals, and we just have over-programmized, if that's even the word, our faith traditionally, and mystery kind of doesn't have a place in there. But the closer you sit with God in your disciplines, whether that's prayer and fasting and even compassion stuff that you're doing, you begin to find this mystery of your faith and going, I don't really know and won't ever know the God that I follow. I can't categorize him. I can't, I only know what he's revealed to me. I don't know any more than that. And so we have scripture, but that is a fraction of who our God is. You know, like just learning to sit and let your mind be completely open to the fact that you know so little.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful part of faith. That's something I've been falling in love with more and more and more as I've kind of grown in those different rhythms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we like to have answers. We don't like to not know. Again, that phrase, I don't know. We don't like to say it. We don't want to admit that we don't know. We want to have answers. We want to have an explanation for everything. And so we buy the books on apologetics and go to the conferences, and so we can have an answer for everything. And we do need to know how to defend our faith, but also understand we are finite beings with limited knowledge. Apostle Paul talks about seeing through a glass dimly. That's what we are right now. We don't see everything. Yeah. And as I mentioned in the sermon, we probably don't want to serve a God that we can fully wrap our mind around. I mean, if we can fully understand God, then is he really worth our worship?
Yeah.
I want to worship a God who is so much greater than I am and higher than I am, and who I can't put in my little box, even though I try to. Yeah. And so learning to live with mystery, and we all love a good mystery, you know, we love a good mystery, but part of, watching a mystery is there's kind of that climax and everything gets fulfilled and answered at the end. Yep. We have to understand that there will come a time where it's all answered, but for now, we're living in that mystery and go, okay, let's enjoy the mystery.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't, and honestly, I don't know if when we get to heaven, we'll understand the mystery there either, because it's not like we're going to fully understand God in heaven, because he's still going to be infinitely big and we're still not.
Yes.
And that's cool too. It's just, it is so good to have answers and to be pursuing clarity and proof and evidence, but also the glory of the unknown is something that is part of our faith, that I think is what worship through song and art a lot of times allows us, because it's more of it allows us to step into a moment when it's like God is bigger and I'm just participating in it. I'm not actually trying to set the boundaries. It's art can often be and has been used throughout history as an opportunity to kind of kick off your faith, like to spark a thought, but not like tell you where to go with a thought, just like allow your mind to begin to comprehend and begin to wander around the mysteries of God. We could talk for a long time about that, but we don't have time. Doubt your doubts is the next one. So live with mystery and then learn to doubt your doubts. And this is a phrase I just heard for a couple weeks ago from Chris for the first time. So I'd love for you to just kind of, in a minute.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it comes back to that being willing to live in the mystery is we want answers. And so when we have doubt, well, then what I believe can't be true because I have doubt. And we're like, well, what I said in the sermon is that if you question your faith, which is fine to do, why don't you then question your doubt as well? Oftentimes we give our doubt a courtesy we don't give our faith. And so life happens and God doesn't act the way we think he should, so we start to doubt. And that's a good thing because it can make our faith stronger. But oftentimes we don't question the doubts. Yeah. We just like, I guess I'll just walk away from my faith because I don't understand. Of going, whoa. You were questioning your faith. Why not question your doubts as well? I talked about that using the phrase honest doubt. Let your doubt be honest, not an excuse to not believe, not an excuse to walk away, but an excuse to dig deeper and question and wrestle with things.
And that's, I think, comes back to that same idea of discomfort, like, if it becomes uncomfortable, which there are many values that our society and culture will hold that are in direct conflict with our faith, but we see people we love with these values and it's something they care about deeply, and then we're sitting here going, but my values are different. Like, that's a moment where a lot of doubt can be introduced, and it'd be uncomfortable to be in conflict with my friend, neighbor, family, whatever. And so we do that exact thing. We push away the doubts and say, we're not going to, clearly my faith must be wrong because this feels right. And that's a hard thing to deal with, and
Yeah.
probably a topic for many, many more conversations.
Yes, I think that the two extremes. One is that you push your doubts away. I just want to pretend I don't have them. Or we push our faith away and live with the doubt of going, no, let's do both. Let's admit our doubt and admit our faith and let them wrestle together so that our faith can grow deeper.
Yeah. Which is that be honest with yourself part of
Yep.
it's like being able to step back and go, okay, like I see what's going on. Like
Yep.
let's objectively look at it, but also understand that we're individual people with individual feelings and
Yep.
emotions, and like recognize what it is in myself that is having these questions, and really begin to learn ourselves. Let God and the Holy Spirit begin to like help you understand who you are. Why do you act the same way every time? And I mean, when we were talking as a staff yesterday, Thomas was sharing about who he is and how he approaches some aspects of faith, and I'm sitting there going, man, that is cool, and I am so different than that, and it's not a bad thing, because God created us both individually differently, and we can complement each other because of it. And I think that's where that be honest with yourself can be pretty key.
Yeah, I think definitely, and especially when it comes to your doubt of what I just kind of mentioned earlier, and doubting your doubts. Sometimes, if we're honest, we don't want to believe, and we use that as an excuse, because we know that if we go all in with Jesus, there are certain aspects of our life that are going to have to change, and that brings discomfort, and we don't necessarily want to change. And so we'll use doubt as an excuse to not go deeper in our faith, because we don't want to change the way we live. And so just being honest, why are you doubting?
Yeah. And then in like 30 seconds, because we talk way too long, can you hit this last one? To live according to the faith you still have.
Yeah. Understand again, doubt is not the same as unbelief. That doubt can be that bridge to make your faith go deeper. And so that the father who brought his son to the disciples, they couldn't heal him. And so then he says to Jesus, if you can. And Jesus says, well, what do you mean if you can? And everything's possible for him who believes. And the dad says, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. So did he have perfect faith? No. Yeah. But he had enough faith to come to Jesus. And Jesus talks about mustard seed sized faith. We don't need to have big faith. We just need to have enough faith to come to Jesus. So you're not going to have all the questions answered. Just live based on the faith that you have now, and your faith will grow as you move forward.
I love that mustard seed imagery. Love it, love it, love it. And I would love to talk about it, but we don't have time. It's been good as always. We're going to be back next week talking about shame and regret. Apparently I'm going to be here every week. I was planning on having other people jump in, but apparently it's just been me. So I'm excited to sit down and talk about that conversation, because I think shame and regret is something that we're going to have to wrestle with in our culture and for years to come. I think this is a part of our culture that's here to stay. And it would be wise for us as Jesus followers to know how to deal with it well. So I'm excited for that conversation. Yes. Guys, thank you so much for joining us as always. And if there are any questions or comments that you guys have, feel free to throw them in the comments. We would love to engage with that with you. And Troy, thanks again for jumping in with us.
Yes. See you guys later.
Yep.